Hey you guys, it's Donna from fedupwithfatiguecom, and today I'm going to be giving you guys a health update. I have added a couple of new diagnoses and I wanted to share what's been going on with you guys and to see if any of you guys have experienced anything similar and might have suggestions or recommendations or whatever. So I'm going to give a little bit of a timeline for people that aren't familiar with my backstory. So diagnosed with fibromyalgia in 2014. Diagnosed with chronic Lyme disease in 2016. So essentially at that time, the doctors were saying the Lyme disease is what's causing your fibro symptoms. In 2017, I developed a herniated disc in my lower back. 2018, I had back surgery to remove that herniation because more conservative therapies were not working. And 3 weeks after I had the back surgery, the disc rebulged, so essentially it ended up being a failed surgery. 3 weeks after the disc rebulged, I developed what's called a spontaneous cerebrospinal fluid leak. And what that means is the brain and the spinal cord are protected in a fluid-filled sac that basically just protects and adds some cushioning and buffering from us moving and jostling around. And I had gotten a hole in the sac that holds that fluid. So in people with spinal fluid leaks, you basically have to stay laying flat in order to be headache free. If you sit down or you stand up and walk around, then the gravity causes the fluid to leak out of the leak. And then as the fluid leaks out of the sac, your brain sinks farther and farther and farther down into your neck and into your spine, and it causes very horrific headaches. It took 6 months for me to get the doctors to diagnose me because I had to go to them as usual and say, I think this is what's going on. So it took 6 months to convince them that this is what was probably going on, for them to give me the imaging to diagnose the spinal fluid leak originally, and then to get the leak patched. And I had a couple of procedures that failed, and then finally in January of 2019, a physician at Johns Hopkins was able to patch my leak up. Now, unfortunately, what happened is once the leak was patched, I developed a condition called intracranial hypertension. It's also known as pseudotumor cerebri, which translates into basically false brain tumor. So IH, I'm just going to use that acronym from here forward because it's easier. IH gives you all of the symptoms of a brain tumor, but you don't have the tumor, and hence that's why they call it pseudotumor, fake tumor. And so I've been dealing with the IH for the last 18, 19 months. Now, the IH symptoms, those are mainly chronic daily headaches, nausea, dizziness. I've had a lot of cognitive issues, having issues being able to write, which is what I do for a living, having issues with reading comprehension, having memory issues, just having a lot of days where I just can't think, can't concentrate, can't focus. So I have gone over the last 18, 19 months to all sorts of different specialists, neurologists, neuro-ophthalmologists, neurosurgeons. And the symptoms of IH, if they get very severe and if you keep that pressure stays in your head enough, it can eventually put so much pressure on the optic nerves that you go permanently blind. So this isn't a condition that you want to play around with. Also with the IH, basically there are two different theories on what causes IH. The first theory is that somehow the body has forgotten how to regulate the spinal fluid, and it's making too much fluid, and the fluid builds up on your brain, and that's what triggers the headaches. The other theory is that there's somehow a structural problem, and that is keeping the cerebrospinal fluid from being able to drain out of the brain as it should be, and again, that triggers the headaches. So some people with pseudotumor or IH fall into that, body's making too much. Some people fall into the, it's a structural issue, and some people, no one really knows what's causing it, and those people, they call it idiopathic. We don't know what the hell is wrong with you. All right, so about 4 months ago, I talked my doctor into letting me try amitriptyline because I had seen in a couple of the IH groups on Facebook that people were successfully using amitriptyline to help reduce their IH headaches and stuff. Now, I had already tried, I think, four or five different medications for IH, the standard medications for it, and none of those helped. Either they just made the symptoms worse, or they I wasn't able to stay on them due to side effects. I'd actually taken amitriptyline when I was first diagnosed with fibro back in 2014, 2015. And so I was familiar with that drug. Now, it didn't help my fibro back then, and it did lead to me gaining 40 pounds while I was on it. At the time, I didn't realize that it was the drug that was causing it. And amitriptyline is, I don't remember if I said this or not, it's an antidepressant. I think it's an older one that came out in like the 70s or 80s. So we decided to do a trial with amitriptyline to see if it would help with IH. And initially, it actually did help with relieving some of the headaches, and also it helped with the intensity. Now, as time has gone on, and the effectiveness of the amitriptyline seems to be waning, so that I'm getting headaches basically every day now, and but the intensity for the most part still isn't as bad as it was, so I'm still getting some of that benefit. All right, so that's kind of where we are on that. All of this is going to make sense in a minute. I swear I'm going to pull it all together at the end. Now, like I said, tried the amitriptyline. It was working initially. Some of the success on that has failed at this point, and that's actually not unusual. I've had that happen with one or two of the other medications that I tried with IH. It just got to the point where they weren't doing anything anymore. So maybe about 2 months ago, my lymanfibro IH doctor, he suggested that I go see a chiropractor that he works with in Annapolis, Maryland. And he felt like that maybe there was something structurally wrong going on, like in my neck or back of my head or whatever, and that the chiropractor maybe could free up some space and help with the fluid draining out of my head better. So I agreed to do that, and it was a big commitment to go to that chiropractor because he's an hour and 15 minutes away from where I live, so it's a 2.5 hour drive round trip. So you drive an hour and 15 minutes, you spend 20 to 30 minutes with him, and you drive an hour and 15 minutes back. So I did about, I think, 5 sessions with him at this point. Now, this chiropractor is not like usual chiropractors. He actually specializes in the atlas of the neck. And if I'm understanding correctly, the atlas is like the top bone in your neck where your skull joins your neck. And in some people, that atlas can get tilted, and when it tilts, it can compress nerves and cause all types of problems, you know, headaches and nausea and all the kind of stuff that I've been having with the IH, right? So when I started to work with the chiropractor, he took x-rays, and sure enough, my atlas was out of whack. It was tilted. So we decided, okay, we're going to work together, see if he can reset the atlas, and there were some other things going on in my neck as well that he felt like he could help with. Now, what happened is every single time he would give me an adjustment, I would end up with pretty severe neck pain afterwards, and then all of my symptoms would flare up after, flare up for about 3 or 5 days. And even the lymanfibro stuff, I just flared up, and I couldn't understand what was going on, because this chiropractor, he was not like other chiropractors I've been to. He doesn't do the cracking, popping, like I had a chiropractor one time that like laid me on my side and then twisted me up and sat on me and everything. He doesn't do that kind of thing. His adjustments are extremely gentle, and he also uses that little gun that, if you've ever been to a chiropractor, you probably know what I'm talking about. And I started flaring up all the time, and so I mentioned to him what was going on. I also mentioned to my lymanfibro and IH doctor, and they both came back to me and they said, that should not be happening. What he's doing to you on those adjustments, you should feel better. You should not be flaring up. You should not be having severe neck pain. Something else is going on. And I had also figured out, as I was going through the process for these flares and such, that my flare symptoms would improve or get worse depending on how I was holding my head. So if I tucked my chin a little bit, the symptoms would get better. And if I held my head up like I'm talking to you right now, my symptoms would get worse. So my doctor and I came to the agreement that I was going to do an MRI. And I had heard in some of the IH Facebook groups that some people were getting upright MRIs where they were either sitting or standing during their MRI. And that was finding nerve compression and stuff that wasn't being found in a regular lay flat MRI machine. And so I mentioned this to my doctor, what do you think about me getting an upright MRI? And when I said it, he was like, oh yeah, I think that's actually better than just doing the regular MRI. So he did the order. I went down and I had the MRI about 2 weeks ago, and it was a sitting MRI. Got the results back a couple of days later, and they found something in my neck. What they found is called a chiari malformation. And my very basic understanding of it, I haven't had a chance to delve into all of the research on chiari, what it is, treatments, all of that. But my understanding is the cerebellum is located at the back of the head, right above where the neck and the skull meet. And there's a channel right there where the nerves and everything go down from your brain into your spine and then feed out into your body, right? And what happens with the chiari is that a portion of that cerebellum has sunk down into that channel and is blocking that channel, and it's impeding the flow of the cerebrospinal fluid. And so the fluid is building up in my brain, and it's triggering the headaches and all of that. And what I figured out after a few days after my last session with the chiropractor, what we think was happening is he was doing just enough to inflame this neck tissue right here. And it was swelling up, and it was further closing a channel that was already partially closed. So that's what we think was happening. So at this point, I am going to be seeing a couple of different neurosurgeons. I have reached out to my neurosurgeon here in Delaware, and we'll be seeing him within the next 2 weeks. And my lymanfibro doctor also wanted me to see a different neurosurgeon who is down in Maryland. Now that doctor, unfortunately, is not taking new patients, so I'm in the process of finding out if there are other recommended physicians. I definitely want to see at least 2, maybe 3 neurosurgeons, have them look at my new imaging, have them give, their opinions and recommendations. I know that there is a surgery they can do for this where they basically remove part of your skull bones, and that frees up space so the fluid can move out more easily. But it is a very serious surgery, and so I want to make sure that I do my homework, talking to the doctors, doing my own research, so that I completely understand what the surgery is, what it might encompass. And here's the thing, maybe there's some other option that doesn't require surgery, although I don't think that that's the case from what I've read so far. All right, so going back just a little bit, because I mentioned that there's a second diagnosis, right? The last adjustment that I had with the chiropractor, because I was flaring up so much, he had recommended that when I got home, start icing my neck, 20 minutes on, 20 minutes off. And so I did that evening till bedtime. And sure enough, when I woke up the next morning, I did not have the neck pain that I normally do. So what I think happened is the ice kept that area from swelling up and sending me into a neck pain flare and worse headaches and all of that. I did wake up with a headache that morning though, and that's not unusual for me though, because when you're in bed and you're laying, semi-flat, the pressure, the fluid builds up on your brain and causes the pressure. So it's not unusual for IH people to wake up with a headache in the morning. That headache, however, I could never get a handle on it that day, and it just kept sticking around. And normally, if I woke up with a headache, the headache would alleviate somewhat for a few hours, midday, afternoon, and then it would start to get worse again in the evening after I ate dinner. But this particular day, no matter what I did, it didn't alleviate the headache. I'm like, what the hell is going on with this thing? It's just making me miserable. And around dinner time, the headache morphed into something very different. It was extreme to the point where I was considering going to the emergency room to, either get one of their headache cocktails or maybe to do a lumbar puncture to drain out the excess fluid. And fortunately, I have a friend that suffers from migraines, so I was able to call her and ask, what do you do for these things? And she recommended several different things that eventually broke the headache right before bedtime. Now, there was a time when I was having that headache where I tuned into my head and what was actually happening in my head. And I realized the headache was only on the left side, and I was also having light and sound sensitivity. And I don't have any of those generally with my IH headaches. And I realized what I was having was a migraine. Once I realized what I was having was a migraine, I realized, oh, you have been having migraines off and on for quite some time, because I recognized what that headache felt like because I'd had that kind of headache before. So that's my new second diagnosis, and I'd actually been very reluctant to ever be diagnosed with migraine, because migraine to me is sort of like fibromyalgia. A lot of doctors just assign patients that label when they don't know what's wrong with them and they don't have the time or the knowledge to try to figure out what's wrong. And I want to clarify, I'm not in any way saying that fibro and migraine are, fake illnesses or whatever. They are not. What we are feeling is very real. However, I think some doctors are lazy or busy or whatever, and they assign that label when they have not really done the research and diligence that needs to be put forth to diagnose people. I feel like it's kind of a catch-all term, both of those, fibro and migraine. So, but anyway, I figured out that it's migraine, and my lymanfibro IH doctor, prescribed medication, Amitriptyline, I think is what it's called, for me to take when I get these headaches. I actually had another migraine yesterday and had to use the Amitriptyline for the first time. Let me see, what else did I want to discuss with you guys? So in March, I made a pretty big decision because things had gotten so hard for me to work And if you kind of go back to that time frame, you can see where I was only posting once a week, the news, fibro and Lyme news post, which doesn't, it's much easier to do that post than it is to write an article from scratch. So I just didn't have the cognitive ability to be able to push out many posts back then. And so I made the decision that I was going to start the process of applying for Social Security disability. And finally got all of my paperwork submitted in May. I'm hoping that maybe I'll get I won't get denied the first try. What I did is I decided I was going to basically layer them down with documents. So I filed based on 9 different conditions, and I also listed out like 25 different physicians that they were going to be required to go and get my records from. I wanted to complete such a paperwork mess that there was no way that they could look at me and think this woman can work. Because I mean, I've been pushing through with the lymanfibro, working with that for years now. I have not been able to work full-time for years though. I've only been working part-time, and then when the spinal fluid leak happened, I basically had to quit work for about 5 months. And then with the IH, I'm working, but I'm down to like maybe 10 or 15 hours a week at this point. It just is very difficult to work with the lymanfibro, plus the headaches, the nausea. I've got overactive bladder, so you're constantly getting up and down for that. I've still got the lower back pain, which is with me every single day, that, you know, it makes it uncomfortable to sit for long periods of time. So, I mean, I've got a lot of conditions on that application that I'm hoping it will be enough for them to look at in totality that this is, no wonder this woman is having difficulty working, right? Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about just briefly is the future of fedupwithfatiguecom. And I just want to let you guys know that regardless of whether I get disability or I don't, that website, as long as I am physically able, that website is going to continue, because Fed Up with Fatigue is my labor of love. And it's also, in many ways, a connection to the outside world for me. What I mean by that is, part of the reason that website was started by me is because the people in my life, my closest people, none of them could really understand what was happening to me as I was being diagnosed with fibro and Lyme and all of that. I needed to somehow connect with other people who got what was going on with me, right? And so that was part of me starting the blog. What has happened though is, I mean, I know that you guys appreciate when I'm sharing my journey with you guys, and I'm sharing treatments that I've been trying that are working, and reviews, and I share with you guys when new research studies come out and stuff. So I know my work is being a benefit to you guys, but at the same time, you guys are a great benefit to me. I learn stuff from you guys as well. You know, it really is like a two-way street, back and forth. It also, being able to do articles and posts for you guys, it gives me a purpose. It gives me a way to give back to the world, to help people, and to have a sense of self-satisfaction. So as long as I am physically able, the website will continue. Let me see, is there anything else? I talked about the migraine diagnosis, talked about the chiari. What I would like to say is, if any of you guys out there if you guys have dealt with chiari, with pseudotumor or intracranial hypertension or migraine, I would love it if you guys would share any ideas, suggestions, recommendations of things that might help those conditions, of, you know, good online resources for those conditions, that kind of thing. So if you know of anything related to those conditions, please feel free. I would encourage you to leave a comment either on YouTube with the video or on my blog with the post that's going to go with the video, because, you know, I have never professed to be an expert in anything, and like I said, we learn from each other, and I definitely at this point need help and suggestions and recommendations. So feel free to share with me whatever you guys may know that you think might be helpful. And I think that's it. I know there's a lot going on in the world today with COVID and the protest and the election coming up, and just all types of economies in the can, that kind of thing. So I just want to encourage you guys also, you know, to please, you know, make sure you're taking care of yourself, make sure you're finding positive ways to deal with your stress and that kind of thing. And I just hope that you guys are doing as well as you can, given the situation that, you know, is going on with world events at this point. I think that's gonna be it. I think I did mention, hopefully I mentioned in the video, that there was a condition that IH and also pseudotumor, that condition is associated with Lyme and also fibro. So I'm going to try to look for some links. I know I've got one of my blogger friends, Julie Ryan from Counting My Spoons. I know she's done something on intracranial hypertension, and I think Court Johnson over at Health Rising has done articles on it as well, and I'm sure there are others. So I'm going to try to actually include some of those resources in the blog post, because I can guarantee you that some of you guys that are having headaches every day, like I am, it's a pretty good chance you may have IH, or you may have an undiagnosed spinal fluid leak that you're not aware of. Because getting headaches every single day with fibromyalgia and Lyme, that is, in my opinion, that's not normal. And some of these two conditions may possibly be an underlying cause for what's happening with that. I think that's it. I'm going to sign off. I hope you guys are as well as possible. Love you, and see you later. Bye.